Welcome to the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. In each episode, we will discuss professionals serving the tech startup market and the various issues of importance to those companies. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. Now here's the host of From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market, Phil Crowley.
Welcome, and thanks for tuning into our podcast. We focus on bringing you discussions with thought leaders in the life sciences and other technology areas, individuals with the kind of experience that you can benefit from to sort of demystify parts of the process of developing great ideas into products that can improve the lives of thousands or even millions of people. Today, I'm delighted to have with us Kathy Sohn, a really well-experienced executive in the life sciences. Kathy is an adjunct professor at the University of California at San Francisco, and she's been a board director of several public and private biopharma companies and has over 30 years experience in the biopharmaceutical industry. She served as the global head of business development for GlaxoSmithKline before she retired, and then also served as a chief strategy officer and a vice president of strategic development for SmithKline Beecham Pharmaceuticals. So she's got a lot of experience to share with us today, and I'm delighted to have her here. Kathy, welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here, Phil.
Kathy, how did you get involved in the life sciences to begin with? Everyone has his or her own pathway. How did you come to be involved in this wonderfully vibrant community?
So in my case, it's really kind of a personal story. I'm the daughter of a pharmacist who really, I grew up seeing how my father in the community was respected healthcare professional and was really a bridge between a lot of the physicians and patients in terms of new medicines and describing them. I went to UCSF, University of California, San Francisco, his alma mater and mine, as the dean used to say, first recycled member of the class of 52. And so as the daughter of a pharmacist and a pharmacist myself, I grew up and then I was trained and experienced in my internships, seeing how medicines impacted patients' lives and how medicines that were in clinical research at UCSF and Kaiser San Francisco were developed for patients with unmet medical needs.
I see. Well, in your experience, how did you wind up going over onto the corporate side of things from after your academic program?
So after 4 years as assistant professor at the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy and doing one clinical research study at a time at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia and at the VA Philadelphia, one of the physicians that I worked with closely, he moved from being the head of infectious disease at one of the hospitals in town to SmithKline in French, and he recruited me over. He said, Kathy, if you can do one clinical study at a time, and if you can teach medical and pharmacy students about new medicines, and if you can help with the drug information service and the formulary service at Penn, you could certainly be perfectly fit to come in and work in medical affairs at SmithKline and French. So it was really about the position and what I was doing in academics, but importantly, that we'll hear as a theme throughout this session, the relationships you build, that I built outside of my direct academic sphere, are the ways that I came across new opportunities to make the transition after 4 years in academics to industry, starting in medical affairs in the R&D group.
And that was at SmithKline in French. It sounds like even though it's a technical field, the human touch is still very important in terms of being able to connect with people and find opportunities. And you, as a woman, the pharmaceutical industry, at least traditionally 10, 20 years ago, was viewed as an old boys network and very difficult for women, even very talented women like you, to get ahead. What obstacles did you have to overcome, and how has that changed over the years?
So it's interesting you speak about it being an old boys network. In fact, the year I was recruited, the company did not have enough diversity to meet the government requirements as a supplier of medicines to the VA, to the Federal Supply Schedule,
Mhm.
to Department of Defense, where you have to have a population that reflects the community in which you do business. So actually, I was recruited. At the time, it was called a tagged position. Today, we'd call it a DEI position.
Mhm.
What came with that was our CEO. He gave five headcount to medical affairs and said, for 3 years, I'm going to fund and be the sponsor for these five individuals. And after that, they and you will have to find a place for them potentially within the company. But it was really a mandate to be able to continue to have the government as our biggest customer.
Mhm.
So and then once a month we'd meet with our sponsor, the CEO or else the senior VP that reported to him, and have lunch where they would ask us, so what is it that you're working on, and how could I help you
Mhm.
overcome any issues that you have? That was my example that I continue to then try and transition to being a sponsor today for young individuals. The value of a sponsor that meets with you regularly, understands your capabilities, and then advocates for you is invaluable. And that to me, and I think that's the biggest, not, I wouldn't say only an issue, but it's really the biggest need, and it's really the biggest reward that sponsors, men and women,
Mhm.
can have for the next generation of entrepreneurs coming up in the system in small companies and in large.
Well, it sounds like mentorship is incredibly important, and I guess that's even a greater challenge with the younger generation of workers who don't want to have to come into the office and would rather appear via Zoom as we are appearing today, rather than have those chance encounters with people who can help them develop themselves and develop their careers. Now, you started out on the research side, but
Hmm.
you wound up on the business side now. And
Hmm.
I think that's a testament to the skill set that people who grew up and grow up in the sciences, science, technology, engineering, management, the life sciences, because in my view, it teaches you critical thinking and problem solving skills that you can apply to wherever your passion leads you. So, how did you wind up making that transition?
So I have come to describe it as my 50-50 rule. Every new position should be 50%. You should be ready day one, educated, experienced, and ready to hit the ground running. 50%. The other 50% should be a challenging and learning experience. And the way I have now reflected on that, I came across this 50-50 rule is that my mother, who graduated with a triple major from Berkeley in 1949, international relations, political science, and psychology. When she went to work originally for the first 4 years after graduating at the precursor to the today's State Department,
Mhm.
and then she went back after she had myself. She went back after she had my sister. But when my parents decided to move from San Francisco to a small town and buy a pharmacy, um, in a town of 10,000 and nothing bigger for 60 miles in Ukiah, California, there was no State Department, satellite office. So she then said, okay, if this is what I'm trained in, what else could I do? And that's how I've approached each of my roles. I think both having that openness to
Mhm.
doing something new that is 50% what you could do day one and 50% new. And second thing is really curiosity. Well, what is it that they did? So when I was in, medical affairs, what is it that they did in market research, or what is it that they did in marketing, or
Mhm.
what was it they did in sales or MSLs? And that's kind of interesting. I wonder how I could help there, and I wonder if I could do that. And then to be verbal and build relationships outside of my current silo, to say, I'm really kind of curious about this MSL role, or I'm really kind of curious about this new product introduction, this marketing role, which I thought was 50% like academics teaching
Mhm.
medical and pharmacy students, and 50% new.
Mhm.
So that's really what I have, like I said, come to call that the 50-50 rule. And curiosity and building relationships are key.
Well, it sounds like to a certain extent, it's like being a young bird and taking your first chance to see whether or not you can fly, and knowing that you have some of the skills and the confidence to believe in yourself, that you're going to be able to develop the other skills that you will need in order to be successful. And I think one of the key aspects that you mentioned, Kathy, is curiosity. How do things work? How do things work outside my area, and what's my relation to them? I think that's extremely important. So you learn more about marketing. When did you make the switch from the more technical side to the marketing side?
So it's interesting. While I was at the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy on faculty, I was on a task force where we looked at, could we merge or could we have a JV with one of the business schools in town? And that was kind of the first idea about doing something business, but also clinical pharmacy related.
Hmm.
In the company, I was 4 years in medical affairs. And then I was called one Friday afternoon to say, could you come down and, see Roger? He wants to talk to you. He's like the senior VP of marketing. So, yes, I'm available. I went down and he said, we are going to move from having corporate development for what we call L&A, licensing and acquisition, move from being a corporate only function. And we are by therapeutic area going to embed that role within the business units so that the person who's looking at external um, uh, technology or product or licensing opportunities or acquisitions, but also now having more commercial input from the US into R&D for what should move from pre-IND to phase one. So assuming it was going to be successful, what would be attractive commercially? And that's where, so after 4 years, but that's where my experience working at Kaiser, San Francisco, as first of all, a pharmacy intern, and then 1 year after I graduated as a pharmacist, and being the co-editor of the drug bulletin for Kaiser Permanente. And in the drug bulletin, it was meant to educate physicians, nurses, and others on why we did and did not put certain medicines on the formulary.
Hmm.
So that was really my transition 4 years in, where I had been the medical affairs representative on a project team to decide about licensing in or moving an internal asset from IND to phase one, to being the project lead. We called it business development. I was the associate director at that time. And that's how I made the move from
Sure.
being the team member with a limited responsibility to being the project leader, project management at the time for the team, but in commercial.
Fascinating story of development. I'd like to take just a minute now to tell our viewers and listeners a little bit about Crowley Law. You can see us at CrowleyLawLLC.com. We are a law firm that is focused on and passionate about helping life sciences and other technology entrepreneurs realize their dreams, to take great ideas from the laboratory bench to the patient's bedside, or from the garage to the marketplace, using technology to enrich the lives of thousands or even millions of people. I'm a former physicist who decided that it was easier to help people as a lawyer than doing my work. I worked in superconductivity, extremely low temperature physics. And I know how difficult it is and how dedicated scientists and technologists are in creating new knowledge. And I know how difficult that is. And as a lawyer, I appreciate the obstacles and the landmines that stand in the way of someone who wants to take a great idea and bring it to the marketplace. So we bring an appreciation of that, an appreciation of what many of you do out there into the way we represent our clients, taking them through formation of companies, through acquisition of licensed property from universities, from licensing out their technology, entering into collaboration agreements to try to protect the founders, protect the people who have spent so much of their lives in developing and in refining the technology that they're trying to move forward. So if you have questions in this area, please contact us at info@CrowleyLawLLC.com. We'd love to talk to you, and we're here to help. Well, Kathy, I wanted to follow up a little bit on your career path. And you were the global head of business development. What did you like most about that job?
So my entire 28-year career at SmithKline & French, SmithKline Beecham, GlaxoSmithKline was around new products. So what I liked most about business development was finding new technology to extend our current products, finding and licensing in technology or products that were prescription to move them to over the counter, or to doing acquisitions that brought in important new products to the company. And it was very much kind of a follow on to what I had done in the pharmaceutical division for 16 years, launching new products. So having the assignment to evaluate vaccines and then to launch and build the US business from scratch. Actually, Phil, that was my most entrepreneurial experience in my 30 years at a bigger company. But launching and creating a new business within a bigger company, oh, by the way, at the time of a merger, was really where you had to have the strategic focus, the discipline, requesting the financial support. So new products, whether developing them internally, as I did with neuroscience and cardiovascular and metabolic, or whether it was bringing assets from our international business into the US, the vaccine business, or whether it was licensing in products or joint ventures, as we did with Correg with Boehringer Mannheim, to bring the congestive heart failure indication into a global launch. So it's really, like I said, as the start of this session, the daughter of a pharmacist myself, recognizing the unmet need. There's all different ways of being involved with new products. And over my career, I've really enjoyed being involved in new products at each of those different roles.
Well, one of the things I take away from your experience, Kathy, particularly your experience in building up your kind of entrepreneurial exercise inside SmithKline in the midst of the merger that was ongoing, is the focus on relationships and human communication and relationship skills, because ultimately all of these companies, corporations, big companies, are peopled by individuals who have their own needs, who have their own agendas. And it seems to me, and I think research bears this out, that those people who have the best people skills, who have, as Daniel Goleman recognized in his book, Emotional Intelligence, people with emotional intelligence are the ones that really can go forward and develop their careers. And so not only is the technology important for entrepreneurs, but being able to relate to other people in a productive way. I know you have been a wonderful help and consultant to many companies. I met you as you were helping my client Bioaxone Biosciences, and I'm sure you have your list of things that are problems that and mistakes that small companies make that really get in the way of success. Could you go through a few of those and perhaps how to inoculate yourself or inoculate your company with some vaccine that prevents one from falling into those particular traps?
Sure. So I think what I really try and help the companies, CEO, private companies that I work with, is to really have them focus in on not just the science that takes them to the next step, but assuming the science works. What is the end patient benefit? How much unmet need is there? What's the competitive scenario? And then what language best communicates the story of the company? Like, how did it originate? Was it in academics or whatever? And what made this a unique starting point? What is the rationale for believing that the science could prove out to be important solution? What's the differentiation versus what's out there today in therapeutics or what's in development in a similar time frame? And then to be honest about what are the challenges that a licensing partner or that you, if you got funding all the way through, will
Mhm.
have to face. So I think telling the story concisely with the end in mind is really key. And then the second thing are the kind of the two key points of success, I think, for a small company is
Mhm.
building the right team from the start, small enough, even if some are external contracted team, and then building relationships outside the company. Start, who would be the natural funders or the logical funders? Who would be
Mhm.
the natural partners? And start to get to know them and build a relationship before the day you're looking to now have a licensee or to build or to do a Series A or Series B.
Mhm. Well, it sounds like it's a process of building credibility with people with whom you'll want to have a relationship at some point in the future, but then identifying them. Are there any big warning signals that you see when you go into a company? Are there features on the management team, on the scientific team, with respect to the board or investors that sort of give you that sense that there's something not right here, and those could be flags which, if they're not addressed, could result in the failure of the company or at least not reaching its full potential?
So I think it falls in a couple of buckets. One is the team too much all the same expertise? In
Mhm.
other words, is everybody in research, they've studied this mechanism forever, the people in management, the investors, they all done X. What we know is that a team that has complementary skills and capabilities is really important. The thing I find is that sometimes first time entrepreneurs are gung ho to do it themselves with teams that they've worked with. But in like at the bio meeting in June out in San Diego, it was really emphasized session after session. Investors, because they have a whole track for young companies and for smaller biotechs.
Mhm.
Two things are important. One is the team, and two is the science, and what's the rationale to believe it will be differentiated. So
Mhm.
having the team that it has skills and capabilities, advisors and board members that will bring credibility and expertise for the longer term. And then starting to build relationships with investors early before you're ready to ask for the investment.
Kathy, in your experience with smaller companies, how important is it for the company, and particularly the CEO and management, to do their own due diligence on potential investors?
So it's really important because mostly for time management, there's there's publications that tell you who are the top 100 investors in the last year. And then you look and it gives you the report on what phase did they invest in? Was it pre-IND? Was it phase one, two, three, whatever? So to do research and then look at and they publish on their website
Mhm.
what's their investment thesis. Some people like to fund early and help startup companies. Some people like to come in at when it is de-risk at after phase 2B. And some companies, investors, excuse me, like to fund things that are ready for commercialization.
Mhm.
I think it's really important that you spend your time with those that are in their current portfolio, have companies that are similar stage to you, or are you in gene therapy? Have they never invested in gene therapy? You have to have a pretty experienced management team that they've made money on before that they'll do gene therapy. However, if they've done a lot of cell and gene therapy, or they've done a lot of biologicals and you're a biologic, that's how to productively spend your time building relationships and then read about the companies they've invested in before. What do they, the investor, and what do the companies say about where they are and what's the language they use to
Mhm.
describe their investment thesis?
So it sounds like kind of matching your pitch to what the investor is interested in, so long as it's realistic to do that, is part of the process of making people feel comfortable with you as an entrepreneur, that at least it's worthwhile looking at you. And then you at least can get through the door and be one of the people that they have discussions with.
And then importantly, in the smaller company's pitch, use language that the investors use on their website and in their quarterly newsletters to LPs, to investors, their limited partners.
Mhm. Is there a great difference between trying to seek investment from venture capital as opposed to going to strategic partners like GlaxoSmithKline or Johnson& Johnson or Pfizer?
So I think, again, it's looking to see if they have, almost all the big companies on their website say for partnerships, and it tells you either what therapeutic areas or they're agnostic or what phase or all phases. But just learn about who you're going to present to. When I was running business development, people came in, they wanted to show me something that was clearly outside of where we were. It's not as attractive as when somebody came in and said, this company it has hired as strategic advisors, Goldman Sachs, and you look at what they say, and then does it make sense? Yes, this is my area. I want to be in oral health care, blah, blah, blah. But I think for strategics to look at what they say in their last 2 years' quarterly reports, what do they say about the growth expectation for the company? And same for an investor. Does it match up? So I think for the investor, it may be important to say, and we expect to have inflection point, data, proof of concept, or something else in this period. In the pharmaceutical side, where they might be looking for a partnership or to acquire the asset or license in, it's to say, how does it fit and what's the benefit to patients, the differentiation, and the timeline. The timeline for both is key. The cost of getting there is key for investors. For
Mhm.
the pharmaceutical company, what I advise people to do is scenario A. This is the timeline and the budget to get to phase 2B data.
Mhm.
If I do it myself as a small company, if I had you, GlaxoSmithKline or Merck, as a partner, this is what the costs won't be the same because they have a lot of internal resources already there.
Right.
And more importantly, this is where I expect we could accelerate time to market. Because for a larger company or a mid-sized biotech, same thing. Every week you accelerate time to approval, it's another week, another month, or 3 months of peak sales that you will get from this. And it's another months of patients that will benefit from it to the financial benefit of your shareholders.
Super, Kathy. Well, that was simply delightful. I really enjoyed our conversation. We've kind of run out of time, although I'm sure we could go on for quite a bit longer. But I want to thank you very much for sharing your broad experience. I'd like to remind people that we have a great deal of free resources at Crowley Law LLC. And by the way, as Kathy was mentioning it, I have an ebook called The Top 10 Causes of Failure for Technology Startups and How to Avoid Them, that covers a number of the issues that Kathy so articulately discussed. So thanks again for tuning in. I hope you found this conversation helpful to you in your quest for entrepreneurship. And please come back and view future podcasts. Kathy, thank you again.
It is my pleasure.
You've been tuning into the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe, like, leave a positive review, and share with others.